Play.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, tuning in to today's episode of Let's Talk. And we're going to have a quick show on the Netflix series that sort of was released on Friday. By the way, Will, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me again. I always love seeing that Ready Play intro.
Yeah, yeah, me. It was kind of in my mind, and I knew what I wanted to happen, if you like, regarding the intro, but I
Yeah,
needed somebody to execute it. So I found an animator, and they more or less pulled off what I wanted. Did
yeah.
Netflix pull off what you wanted in terms of this series, Will?
I like it so far. I finished episode 5 earlier today. And yeah, I don't know what I saw on Twitter. A lot of people are kind of bashing it a little bit, saying that
Mm,
as a tennis fan, it's not any good. I don't know what people were expecting. They they didn't design it for tennis fans. Like that's not the point of the series in my mind. I think they're making it for non-tennis fans to kind of intro them into the sport, right? So um, to give you some perspective, so I watched the whole F1 series.
okay.
Actually, probably finished it 2 or 3 months ago, and I watched the whole thing in like 2 months. I had no prior knowledge of F1. And now I watch the races. Like I'm kind of an F1 fan now.
Okay.
Um, so it was interesting, that I heard that they were creating the tennis one, and there's a lot of um, hype around. I think the way that they're able to make the show and make it for non-tennis fans. So, anyways, I like it a lot so far. So,
Yeah, I'm probably not as enthusiastic as you, Will.
yeah.
I know that I'm not possibly the target audience like yourself. I don't necessarily think they're going for tennis nerds and tennis lovers. They want new people to be attracted to it. But
Hmm.
for example, listen, this is not just me thinking this. I saw an article in the Guardian, which I'll probably bring up on the screen right now.
Hmm.
They've given it 3 out of 5, but they're
Okay.
also wondering if even the neutrals, if you like, the casual observers to tennis, which, like I say, is kind of, I think, probably more who this is aimed at, because
Yeah.
you and I want to know, break point for you and I is, okay, what's he thinking? What's she gonna do to get out of this sticky situation?
Sure.
Are they thinking? I'm going to go down the tee because I think that's going to work for me. It worked for me on when I faced a break point before.
Hmm.
When Nadal is okay. Nadal is not a big focus of this series, I know, but if
Sure.
Nadal is leading in a match, but then he starts to struggle to maintain that lead, does he think back to matches before? Does he remember 2008 and go, "Don't worry, Rafa, you've got this because it's happened before"? That's what we want to know, but
Yeah.
we're not really getting much of that. I thought in episode 5 there were some interesting moments with the Felix
Hmm.
and Nadal narrative regarding his uncle. We'll come to episode number
Yeah.
5 in a minute. What I will say though, Will, and then I'll let you think about this. I think episode 1 was really clearly for people that probably knew nothing about tennis. There were
Right.
and that's fine. That's fine, by the way. There were
Yeah.
explanations on, there are 4 Grand Slams a year. Men play best of 5, women play best of 3. That even a
Right.
casual observer will probably know. I think they went into a bit more detail from episode 2 onwards,
Hmm.
and that was a bit better. We got some quite good stuff with Maria Sakkari. Tennis fans are also a bit annoyed if their favorite player has been skated over. I saw somebody tweeting today, Holger Rune in the whole series gets like one line because he played Casper Ruud.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, what are your thoughts on some of the things I've just said, Will?
Yeah. I guess it just comes down to kind of expectations, right? Like having watched the F1 series recently, I knew that they would go over, here's how scoring works in tennis. There's 4 big tournaments each year, like all this stuff for a non tennis fan or somebody who's totally new to the sport. And I think that's a good thing. Like you know, I I'm watching it thinking about if I were a totally new to this sport, would I enjoy this series? And I think it's accomplished that so far. Um, I think that F1 for some reason, I guess because racing's like so much more clear who's winning and who's not, it just lends itself to this sort of series a little bit better. Like I do think the F1 documentary is or docu-series is better. Um, but I think they've done, as well as they can do to try to make tennis look cool, which is a very important thing. I feel like, at least in the States, I don't feel like tennis is a cool sport right now, like it might have been back in the 90s. So this might help kind of instigate that a little bit.
Yeah, like I say, this Guardian article doesn't feel as though it's made it too cool. I think it's well
Yeah.
made. Let's give the documentaries, docu-series, some praise. I think they're clearly, they've got all the stuff. They really love the pressure element
Yeah.
to it, let's say, and
Yeah.
that's okay for 15 minutes, I thought, but I thought that they probably maybe went a bit too much with the drum beats and
I agree
the
with that. Yeah.
sweat dripping and stuff and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Breakpoint is the title. We get it that these players are under pressure. They're flying around the world,
Yeah.
etc. But I did think that they probably went a bit too far with that at times. They were sort of selling a dead horse, so to speak, in the first episode, at least, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much what I've got for episode one. Yeah, explaining the basics. It's called The Maverick, by the way, the episode one. Of course, it focuses a lot on Nick Kyrgios.
Right.
How do you think Nick came across? Were there any surprises for you?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people judge Nick for like what he does on the court, but then off the court, he seems like a good enough guy to me. But one thing that I did enjoy, kind of selfishly from episode one, is they focused a lot on doubles. It was
Yeah, of
uh,
course,
it was
of course.
surprising. Yeah, so like after watching that episode, if I was totally new to tennis and just watched episode one, you would think that doubles is just as big a deal as singles, because Nick
That's a
talks
good
about
point.
in the episode at the end, he's like, well, now no one can say I didn't win a Grand Slam. But if you like grabbed somebody who's a big tennis fan off the street and said, how many Grand Slams did Nick Kyrgios have? They would definitely say zero, right?
Right.
So like that was interesting how they really put doubles in the spotlight in episode one, and then they didn't mention it after that. But yeah, I think it was probably a smart, I guess, decision to put Nick in the first episode since he's such a colorful kind of animated guy. They're constantly trying to build tension, and get people drawn in that way, which they did such a good job of in the F1 series. And like I said, I think because that's racing, it's a little bit easier to do. Um, with tennis, they're having to talk so much more about the pressure and the mindset and all those things to try to build that tension, which they may have overplayed for sure. I mean, I do tend to agree with you there.
But I guess with Nick obviously going out fairly early in the singles, and that probably lent itself to give double some of the spotlight, if you like. Episode
Right.
two did get into a bit more of what maybe we would like, some of the strategy. Obviously, it focused on two players. I guess with the first two episodes, though, of course, there were two or three big narratives. The Djokovic saga in Australia does get 5 or 10 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. Not a
But I
ton.
guess,
Yeah.
yeah, but neither Nadal or Ash Barty get anything, and
Yeah.
I guess that's because they didn't have access to those players, if you like, in the same way. And
Right.
this brings me to another point. Really, is I don't think Rafa, Novak, Roger, if he had still been playing, Serena as well. We'll see how much they give to her in New York. I
Hmm.
don't think these players probably want it. Let's say that they're fine with Netflix doing the
Yeah.
series, but I'm sure they probably approached Rafa and said, do you mind if we? And he probably would have been like, you know what, the $10 million you offer me for that, the distraction
Yeah.
might give me 1% chance less of winning a Grand Slam, and therefore I don't want this. Also,
Yeah.
does Rafa want to give away anything? He rarely does in a press conference. Never mind a
Yeah.
Netflix series.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what we would get from him anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I think I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure though in the F1 series, uh Verstappen does not appear in the first season or two. So
Okay.
I think it took some time for them to like build momentum and build maybe trust with a lot of the drivers. So if it does well, if they have 2, 3, 4 seasons, like maybe Rafa does end up, coming on and trusting him a bit more, but who knows?
Indeed. Episode 3. So back. Just let's stick with episode 2 a second because there is a couple of Berrettini points I want to point out. There's a lot, of course, on his relationship, of course, which is no longer going with
Emma.
Tomljanovic.
Yeah.
I saw somebody suggesting that because they had this sort of jokey argument about her being on the tennis channel, I think at 8:15 in the morning or something, and
Yeah.
somebody on Twitter was trying to exaggerate. Oh, there you go. There were cracks in the relationship, I think somebody suggested. To me, it was a very cordial, friendly, jokey sort of
Yeah.
conversation that any couple would have. Um,
Yeah.
Also regarding episode 2, yeah, I mean, the thing I wanted from the Berrettini bit was I watched that match against Rafa,
Hmm.
and it was like Rafa was just going to his backhand all the time. Okay, I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's no great shakes, but what I want to know is what's it like when you're Berrettini? Are you secretly thinking, please don't go to my backhand? Or are you thinking, actually, my backhand can get better as a match can wear on? What are you thinking about that? When you're facing serve, are you thinking, this is a big point? I think he's going to go to my backhand now because it's a big point. Or he went to my
Yeah.
backhand the previous 2 times, so I think this time he might mix it up a
Yeah.
bit, or whatever. Also, what are you thinking about when you're playing Rafa? What are the chinks in his armor you feel as though? How often do you do it? Because you're probably going to do something like 2/3. That's my. You're gonna
Yeah.
if you don't want to overplay it because the player will just anticipate it all the time.
Hmm.
This is the kind of stuff that I might want to
Yeah.
hear, and we didn't get that really in that episode either. I
Yeah.
did like one thing that Berrettini opened up on, in that he was kind of sleepwalking through the first 2 sets. He wasn't nervous enough. He wasn't
Hmm.
pumped enough, which is kind of surprising for a Grand Slam semi-final. But I get it. I get it. You're doing this day in, day out. You're hitting balls just non-stop. Sometimes matches are bigger than others for sure. But sometimes maybe a set can just go past you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't know. You're similar to me, and like I would love to hear more about like the strategy and the specific things that they're thinking on like how to get out of a hole or win a match. But um, yeah, I was kind of wanting that while I was watching, but I was also uh, you have to kind of put yourself in the perspective of someone who's totally new to tennis because that's really who this is for, and like they're not going to know what that means to like have uh Rafa keeps going to my backhand, like is he going to do it again, like all the strategy stuff. I don't think that they would uh find it quite as enticing as a tennis player or fan like us, like you and I would, but
Yeah. Somebody here, by the way, talking about Andy Murray's documentary. I think maybe he's got one out there. I didn't know about it, but
hmm,
just suggesting that Murray probably didn't get quite as much access as Netflix did. I guess dollar signs may well explain that, and maybe Netflix has the trust a little bit regarding what they've done before with other ones like Formula One. And
hmm,
yeah, I don't really know much about that Murray complaint, to be honest with you.
yeah, yeah, I don't know much about that either. I did not know that he has a documentary as well.
The 2008 Wimbledon final, they made a documentary out of, I think, John Wertheim's book,
Hmm.
Strokes of Genius. I don't know, have you seen
Hmm.
that documentary?
It's been a while, but I did see it. Yeah.
It's I think it's really good,
Yeah.
and probably a bit more tennisy, but I still think that you can be a non-tennis fan and watch it and go, okay, that's interesting. And
Yeah.
and and I think you get bits in that where Tony Nadal's talking about when Rafa's got his first championship point at the end of the fourth set, and he's going, I knew he'd double fault. I knew he'd double
Yeah.
fault. And even Rafa says in that documentary, he opens up and he says something like, for the first time in my head, I'm bouncing the ball, and I thought, I'm going to win Wimbledon. And it all fell apart, if you like. At least it fell apart in that tiebreak. I mean,
Right.
he went on to win the match, if you like. But also other moments. Him and Tony talk about their meeting that they had at 2 games all in the fifth. Rain comes
Hmm.
down. and they have some really good chats. Rafa says, I might not win today, but I'm not going to lose. In other words,
Yeah.
I'm going to keep fighting despite the momentum being with Roger at that stage.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, look, there's some great quotes here that 12 Travel 21 from that particular documentary, brings up, which is great. And I just thought, and for sure the budgets would be very different, but I thought that did a better job also there's some moving moments in that documentary where they show Federer and Nadal progressing through the draw, if you like,
Hmm.
and I like what they did with that. And actually, Netflix didn't do it that well. They would just show the result, if you like, at times, and
Yeah.
on they went. But yeah. So that was something that struck my mind probably during episode 3, which I've got notes for in my phone. Episode 3 was of course the Indian Wells, Maria Sakkari, and Taylor Fritz. What did you make of that particular
Yeah.
episode?
Yeah, that was I think for me that was probably my favorite episode of the 5. I found so they did dive a little more into some of the like behind the scenes tennis stuff, I felt like. It was interesting seeing Taylor when he hurt his ankle, like
Uh
talking
huh.
with his team and kind of going back and forth on that. Like
Yeah.
it seemed like I didn't realize that, but most of them it seems like they didn't want him to play.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really interesting. They did a good job of kind of creating some tension with that. Um, and then they gave some good background on Sakari, how she's made a bunch of semifinals and never been able to kind of get over the hump, and that made for a good episode as well.
I didn't know that Isla Tomjanovic and Maria Sakkari were friends. That's something I learned.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were friends, but they spoke a bit about their friendship, which was nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, they also in this episode they showed how Sakkari and Fritz progressed through the draw. But like I said, Strokes of Genius I think did that better. It's just a tiny thing I know.
Yeah.
One thing that did come out from Sakkari is she could see the finish line. I think in the semifinals she spoke about that, and that made her more anxious, which I think we
Hmm.
have heard before, but it's still interesting to hear. And for a non-fan, I think that then that dynamic that fans talk about all the time, but to a
Hmm.
non-fan or a casual fan, maybe they hadn't thought of it like that. That seeing the finish line actually is as a casual fan, you might see that someone's up 2-1 and they're up a break in the fourth, and you're thinking, oh, okay, well this is probably done now. But they don't
Right.
realize that it's not complacency that can undo you, can actually be the pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. There was another scene in that one where Paul Anacone, I would love to ask him about this. He says to Taylor, "Remember when you told me to tell you when you're not having a top 10 mentality?"
Hmm.
And he goes, "That's not a top 10 mentality." And I think they had like cut away from what Taylor actually said before
Yeah.
that.
Taylor Fritz is on an
'Cause
exercise bike at this point, I remember. And Taylor says
yeah,
something about how he viewed the previous match had gone, what he thought went right, and what, you know.
he said that like I didn't think I made any bad decisions. I just didn't execute in that game. And as soon as he said that, I was thinking like, oh, that's a really mature mindset. Like he's focusing on process, doing the right things. And like, if you don't execute it, that's a separate problem, but he made the right decisions. And I was thinking that's like a champion's mindset. And then after that, Anakin comes in and says, that's not a top 10 mentality. But I don't know if he was referring to that or if they cut away and he had said something else.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, because
I wanted more from that
I
scene.
was surprised at Anacon's response. It was a bit, oh,
Yeah.
hello,
Yeah.
because he seemed annoyed at that point, which is is an interesting point. But you might be
Yeah.
right; it might be something else. I mean, there were tiny errors in the documentary. One was they talked about in the build up to Indian Wells. They said,
Mhm.
and of course, there's the speculation regarding Ash Barty's retirement. I don't
Yeah.
remember any speculation about her retirement. It was a bombshell.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember any either. She just announced it and
She just
it was
announced
done.
it, and I know that I'm not on the inside of tennis, if you like, but when you talk about speculation, you mean people are talking about it. So, and no
Yeah.
one was. There wasn't as you phoned me a newspaper article a week before that was talking about it. Well, there won't be one because there wasn't one.
Yeah.
So I thought
Yeah.
that was a bit. There's also some funny translations in the subtitles. I don't know how this works elsewhere. There's a really funny one with Tony Nadal. I'll share with you on the screen in when we get to the episode 5. But getting court and course wrong, which is
Hmm.
quite important. I guess it's done
Yeah.
automated, to be honest with you, and probably the automation has just got that slightly wrong. But it was quite a big one. Yeah. So also just certain things regarding Nadal's injury in the Indian Wells final didn't get a mention at all, and that was very much part of the narrative regarding that final. I know
Right.
we're focusing on Taylor, I get that, but still, we're focused
Yeah.
on Casper Ruud in episode 5, but we know what's going on with Rafa as well,
Yeah.
a bit there. Swiatek barely gets a mention in the 5 episodes, despite her epic
Hmm.
run. Yeah, so little
Yeah.
things.
It seems like each episode, like since they're picking one or two players, it seems like they're going into it with the goal of like, we're gonna let you. Our goal is to like bring you inside this player's like mind and like make you a fan of this player, right? And they're not as worried about the grander kind of tennis narrative. They're
Mm.
just worried about like this particular player's story. So I think that's part of the reason they keep leaving a lot of this stuff out. But yeah, definitely am noticing that as well.
One final thing in terms of the subtitles, and I know this might not be the biggest thing in the world, but I've got this English subtitles on. Okay, now I'm watching in English, but I've got them on as
Yeah.
well because sometimes I'm watching with non-native speakers too. Um, and actually though, I think the non-tennis fan could, because I'll be like, oh, they meant set there, not this, or they meant third set, not what they have said, or they meant court instead of course, or, as I said before.
Yeah.
And that's fine for me. I'm just being a bit of a nerd about it, going, oh, they got that bit wrong. But you carry on watching and it doesn't disrupt you. If you're reading that and you are getting it wrong,
Hmm.
then it can confuse you. And that's who the series is aimed at mainly. But I don't quite know
Right.
how to fix that because I think that's an automated issue. Episode 4, we had the clay court swing gets
Yeah.
underway. Paula Badosa is one of the focuses there, and how her season begins to unravel in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, and on Strabor as well in Madrid.
Yep.
Yeah, that was I don't know. I mean, I know On's story a little bit, but not super well. So I liked that they focused on her, and yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about Bedosa's mental health issues either.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't remember a ton from that episode, but
Yeah, I think
um,
you're right. The Jabeur thing was good. Oh, we're just flying back to Berrettini as well. There were some nice bits with his family. Made me laugh when he's in the ice bath as well, and he's
yeah,
cursing, and then his grandmother comes on the phone, and it's quite funny. By the way, Tiafo, maybe I think he has 2 lines in the whole series, and both of them
it's
are
hilarious.
funny. But when
Yeah,
he goes, and I'm not going to say the word, but he sort of uses the F word when he gets a notification basically saying Djokovic is not playing Australia, and he goes,
yeah,
wow, what about that? Oh, well, that's
yeah,
one less to worry about, and
yeah, yeah,
obviously a big competitor who's not going
yeah.
to be there down under. And he also had another line, I think it was in the 4th or 5th episode, that just cracked me up as well.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. I think they're gonna focus on him during the U.S. Open, I believe.
Okay. I mean, they got lucky in a way with having Taylor Fritz and Zachary for Indian Wells, and they both get to the final.
Yeah, that was
Kyrgios, they
interesting.
know, could go either way in terms of how successful his tournament could be down in Australia. But as it turned
Yeah,
out, they could jump on the doubles narrative, as you mentioned. And then
yeah,
if they have Tiafo in New York, they've ticked a lot of boxes.
yeah, yeah. I think they do. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, it's cool just like seeing the behind the scenes, like getting to know the players a little more. And like, yeah, they've got like Bertini eating with his family, On's at home cooking with her mom. Um, yeah, that stuff's kind of cool. And yeah, I think it lends itself to like, if you're not a tennis fan, you can become a fan of a particular player, which
Yeah,
is
that's
what
probably a good point.
yeah, they did a really good job with that in the F1 series of like, you know, creating tension between the players and between the drivers. And that's something I guess they haven't done a ton of that here. Like they haven't created any rivalries like they do in F1. Um, So I'll be interested to see if they do that in the next several episodes, because I think that could be something that really helps it take off and become even more popular. You know, if they really highlighted Tsitsipas rivalry with uh, Kyrgios or Medvedev, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I've just put this up on the screen because in episode 5, as I did briefly touch on before, they do a pretty good job, I think, in covering the awkwardness, if you like, of the situation with Tony
Yeah,
Nadal being Felix's coach and then playing Rafa. One thing, though, that I've always thought, they're not going to say this because they're going to leave it up to the audience to decide, and I get that. But one thing I've always thought is there's no way that Felix hired Tony Nadal as a coach without discussing what happens when I play your niece. There's
yeah,
just, there's because the chances of them playing, bearing in mind how successful they're doing and stuff, they're going to play each other once, twice, 3 times a year, quite possibly, and quite
sure.
possibly in bigger matches than they already have done.
Hmm.
So I just think it's kind of a no-brainer, and then it's up to Tony Nadal what to do. One thing that surprised me was that he attended the match. I thought he would just not attend. He walked out in the 5th set, which I think was quite interesting too. But
Hmm.
before I get to your thoughts on it, I just want to share what I've got on the screen here, because it is a funny moment where in episode 5, he says, I was Rafa's coach and now I'm his uncle. And
Yeah.
it's like he's evolved from being his coach, and
Yeah.
he was hired as his coach, and now he's been hired as his uncle. It's just
Yeah.
a funny moment in that. Again, it's the translation down the bottom there, but I was his
Yeah.
coach, and now I'm his uncle.
Yeah. Yeah. I picked up on that too. That was yeah, that was pretty funny. I figured it was just something kind of lost in translation, but yeah, that was an interesting um part to that episode. And I think Felix did mention at some point, or maybe it was his agent, like, we talked to Tony about this. We knew what we were getting when we hired Tony. Um, so I think it was more something that, like, the media made a bigger deal of than it really was, as far as like Felix and Rafa were concerned. I think they probably both knew as soon as before Tony even joined Felix's team, like, this is what's going to happen if they play. I'm sure there was a conversation around that. There'd have
There
to
was a
be.
there was about 5 seconds where you see Rafa and Tony come across each other in the build up
Hmm.
to that match. I guess Rafa may have just won a match or just come off the practice court. Anyway, and Tony quickly comes off his phone because he clearly wants to talk to his niece about something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think they're about that. There was something about box, so I don't know what was said there. That's a pity that we didn't have a bit more access to that conversation. Yeah, Uncle Tony being fluent in French, of course. I know that most of the family speak Catalan as well
Hmm.
as Spanish. I mean, they're from Mallorca. I'm aware of that not being Catalonia, but I believe that in Mallorca, there's a lot of Catalan speakers too. So that is a step from, in my basic knowledge, it's a step towards French, if you like, from
Mm,
Spanish.
mm.
So that may well help. And of course, Felix being French Canadian, he's fluent in both English and yeah, nephew. Did I say niece, Sharon? I do
Yeah, yeah.
apologize.
You said niece a few times. I
Sharon,
was
I
gonna let it go.
apologize. Good spot. Good spot. They're not going to be asking me to do the subtitles for Netflix. Anyway, yeah. Any other final things you want to touch upon regarding either the series or the 5th episode?
Um, no, I mean, the big question is, like, what is this gonna do for tennis, right? There was a lot of, when this was first announced, a lot of people were wondering, can it make tennis a lot more popular, similar to how F1 is kind of blown up over the last several years, especially here in the US. And yeah, I think you saw my Twitter thread a while back. This was probably 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, maybe,
Yeah,
where, yeah, F1, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like F1 just kind of lends itself to this sort of show a little bit better than tennis. Um, I've enjoyed the series so far, but I do think, like I said, they need to create some more rivalries in there so that we have someone to root for in, like, during the documentary, if that makes sense. But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I don't know if they're going to do that for sure, but I'm hoping that they do, because I think it'll become more popular, make it better. And I think this will get more people into the sport of tennis as far as playing. Um, as far as watching, I'm not sure. We'll see. The TV experience, I think, for a new fan is a little bit difficult if you don't understand kind of the nuance of uh, the rules and um, haven't whether or not you've played before as well. So
Yeah, I mean, what time
we'll
is it going to
see.
finish is a question I get from non-tennis fans, and it's like, well,
Yeah,
sometimes you don't even know what time it's starting, never mind finishing.
right.
Um, Casper Ruud, by the way, there was a funny moment in the fifth episode with him getting a bit. I've never seen Casper Ruud angry. I hear that it does happen, but you could see he
Mhm.
was a bit annoyed about the practice court thing.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was.
yeah, which is quite funny and probably happens a lot. The only difference is if that's Rafa Nadal, I'm sure heaven and earth is moved.
Yeah,
And if it's Casper Ruud, yeah, maybe now, maybe then less so, as it
yeah,
because I think he lost the battle of the wills with regarding that practice court debate.
yeah.
Um,
He
and if
didn't
you're
get that
outside the
one.
top 100, no chance.
Yeah, I've spoken with some players about how the tournaments kind of handle situations like that and like just overall player experience. And I think the French Open is probably the worst of the four,
Okay.
from what I've heard. They um, don't have everything together all the time, to put it nicely, is what I've heard. So
Yeah.
I've obviously never played in it, but that seemed like a situation like that.
Cool. Any final border comments on this? I think you're giving it a tick. I'm probably going a bit closer to the cross. To be honest
Yeah.
with you, it would be great to have a third person on this show who's not tennis buffs like you and I, and just somebody that I do think that there is a sweet spot for Netflix, which is around this. I do think it's not for could be for non-fans as well, but I think the sweet spot is somebody that has a vague interest as
Yeah.
well, and maybe they've heard about Nick Kyrgios being the bad boy, or they know who their Nadals and Djokovic's are, and they kind of know that there's 4 slams a year, and they
Hmm.
maybe watch Wimbledon because if they're from the UK, for example, they have it on their TV all the time.
Sure.
But that's the limit for them, if you like. They don't know anything about Indian Wells. Sometimes I did think that they were. I know Indian Wells is a massive deal, and I know that for Taylor Fritz even more so, obviously being fairly local.
Hmm.
I wonder if people might get confused and think that this is, if you're Italian, then probably Rome is bigger for you. For example, if you're Spanish, you may have a bit of more of an eye on Madrid and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that because they call it the fifth slam, was the commentary,
Yeah.
and
I,
I don't
th-
know.
I,
ATP
I
finals, I think, is probably a more prestigious tournament to win.
Yeah, maybe so.
WTA
I'm not
finals,
sure. I think Indian Wells has more players than a lot of the other Masters 1000. So I think
true.
it's like 96 players, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So a lot of the other Masters 1000 start at 64. So it's a little bit more difficult to win, I guess, for that reason. Although if you're a seed, you're starting in the round of 64 anyways. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Will, this has been great. We'll probably do another one at the next batch, which will be out in June, I believe. They've
okay.
probably done the filming for it. They're just sort of putting it all together, I guess, and we'll
Yeah.
release it maybe midway through the French Open or between the French Open and Wimbledon. They'll find that sort of 2 week sweet spot. I hope. I hope they don't release it during a slam, if I'm honest. But yeah. Any final thoughts on it?
No, I'm hoping that it does well. I mean, just for the sport, I really am rooting for it. But we will see how part two is. I'm
I,
excited
I
for it.
I do hope it brings new people to sport. Absolutely. Just don't want them to play with the sport too much. Sometimes you wonder if the newbies coming in and then they see the Netflix and then they start listening to this and they go, you know what, we're gonna do we're gonna do just add out and all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, 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 leave the point scoring system alone, please.
Yeah.
Adding tournaments and stuff. I mean, I think that the tennis calendar is congested enough as it is. I actually think perhaps for doubles, if you could reduce the calendar a bit on the singles side, it's probably not going to happen because of this. But if you could
Hmm.
reduce the calendar on the singles side, and what about just having a doubles tournament? you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I've
something
got
like
lots of
that.
ideas on that. We can do another episode on that for sure.
We'll touch on it. I'd love to have you and your sidekick on again. By the way, let everyone know what you're doing in tennis and your stuff. By the way.
Yeah, yeah. So our website is thetennistribe.com. I've got a podcast where I interview pro doubles players and coaches, and it's all kind of focused on strategy. So if you play doubles, you can learn a lot as far as strategy goes and how to improve your game. And then I'm also reviewing tennis gear on the website, and we're covering the Pro Doubles Tour. So we're trying to help doubles grow, make it more popular, um, and hopefully this Netflix series can focus a little more on doubles and help us do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they could somehow do something to elevate doubles during the slams. Maybe I don't know. I would like to see. First of all, I'd like to see the calendar thinned out a bit. I
Yeah,
would be quite happy. But if you're from Cincinnati or if you're from Montreal or Toronto or Rome or Madrid, you're going to be upset by the one that I choose, if you like, by being dropped.
yeah.
I mean, I would probably drop Cincinnati. That's the one that I have on my on my hit list,
Mm,
just because I wanna thin the calendar out. By the way, I
yeah,
may not even be in the majority here with how much tennis fans, but I would like to thin the calendar out so we don't have um, Carlos Alcaraz going, you know what? I'm not going to play Rome. Okay, we've Alcaraz is 19, by the way. You get it with Rafa saying I'm not going to play Miami, etc. But
yeah,
I want to see the best players at every event. I would love to see sort of, you got your four slams. That's great. I would love to see a week more between maybe the French and Wimbledon.
yeah,
That would help. Um, yeah, I just want to
yeah.
see the calendar thinned out, really.
Yeah, I think they're making some changes to most of the Masters 1000s, and they're going to make them a 2-week event, a little bit more like Miami and Indian Wells are currently. So I think that should help some.
Okay. Anyway, let's touch base, and I'd love to have you both. I've forgotten your sidekick's name, by the way,
Hanlon, yeah, yeah,
Hanlon. I'd love to have
we're
you
gonna
both
be
on after
doing we're
Australia, maybe.
okay, yeah, yeah, we're gonna be doing a preview. The draws just came out, so we're gonna be doing a preview podcast on our podcast that'll be released later this week. But yeah, we could do maybe a recap afterwards. That'd be a lot of fun.
Great. Yeah, yeah. So check out Will. I've got your website here, thetennistribe.com. I put that in the live chat. So make
Perfect.
sure you check that out. Check out his pod, check out all sorts of stuff. Tennis gear as well. I wasn't aware that you were reviewing tennis gear. I'm just having a quick look right now
Yeah,
on your website. So that's great.
yeah,
Give Will a follow as well on Twitter. And look forward to having you both, you and Hanlon, on after the Australian Open, where we can give a bit of a review for the double side as well.
awesome. Looking forward to it. Thanks again for having me.
Cheers, Will. And now what I do is we play each other out with this little video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.